What I do think to be true is that we should never just be one thing in life. It's okay to reinvent yourself. And I think that it's a great gift in life to know that you can become something totally new if you want to.
I'm Mason Reed, and this is Invested in the Game, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Each episode, we tell the story of remarkable people who have committed their time, resources, and emotional energy into making golf the wonderful and sometimes maddening game that it is. Hello there, and thanks for tuning in to a new season of Invested in the Game. I'm thrilled to be speaking with Iona Stephen on today's episode. You may have seen Iona interviewing players at the British Open or the Ryder Cup on behalf of Sky Sports, and she's turning up more and more on your TV and your computer through her coverage of the Augusta Women's Amateur, the Masters, and her content series on YouTube called On the Road with Iona. You'll understand very quickly when you listen to her why she's had so much success. She's smart, she's charming, and she's golf obsessed, all while also being extremely driven. She's one of those people that, to me, would have been successful no matter what she did. It just so happens she chose golf. Though her professional career was derailed by a very bad wrist injury, she was not deterred, and thankfully she's right in the middle of the golf world, where she was always supposed to be. I hope you enjoy hearing her story and the inspiration and life lessons it provides as much as I did. Hello, Iona. Welcome to Invested in the Game. Thanks for being here.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Mason. Looking forward to a chat with you.
Yes. So anybody who follows you on social media or on YouTube or on the old-fashioned television knows that you seem to always be on the move. Why don't we do this? Where are you now? Where have you been? And where are you going? What's a quick little slice of your travel life?
I'm currently in London. In the last few weeks, I've been in Scotland for the Scottish Open, in Ireland many times. Tomorrow I'm going to Wales for the Women's British Open, the AIG Women's Open. And then from there, I'm going to Slovenia, then to Spain, then to Switzerland, and then back to Ireland for the Irish Open before eventually I head across to America for the build-up to the Ryder Cup. So that is a little slice of my life in the next few weeks.
Unbelievable. So before we ask you, slightly more serious questions, maybe, how do you keep track of all this? Do you have a little Google calendar? Or what is it that, how you know all that, where to be and what airline you're on? How do you do this?
I have an amazing assistant called Ola, and she deserves a shout out. So I'd be completely lost without her, and she keeps me on the straight and narrow. But I have an amazing team. My colleagues and who I get to work with at Sky Sports, they're fantastic and help with a lot of the logistics for the broadcasting side of things. And with my life, it's little surprise. Probably now you understand why I called my YouTube channel On the Road with Iona. And I also have a fantastic team there who helps. So really, it's a team effort. I couldn't do this on my own. It's a whole team thing. But as you know, the professional golfing world, where I've sat on both sides of the ropes now with a microphone in hand as a commentator. It's like a traveling circus. So we all kind of move along together, we go from one stop to the next, and you generally pick up the cadence and the rhythm of it. And it kind of feels natural to me now, which is probably worrying.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that. I always think we sponsor the PGA Tour event at Colonial, the Charles Schwab Challenge. And when we go up there, it's interesting to watch all the trucks come and the equipment and the media, and it's all on a exact schedule. And it's like, and then the tournament ends and it's like a wand is waved and the whole thing just disappears and heads somewhere else, just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, it's absolutely remarkable. And I always say that I think the players, at the very least, every single player that earns a PGA Tour card or DP World Tour card or LPGA Tour card should take a day or half a day to come and see what happens behind the scenes in the TV compound, because we have a few players that retire and then come and join us in the commentary box, or players that are generous enough to maybe join us if they're actually part of the tournament for like half an hour. And without fail, they all come and their jaw is on the floor and they're like, I had no idea. I had no idea that there were thousands of people working behind the scenes to bring this golf to television and to networks around the world. And maybe I'll be a little bit less grumpy at the cameraman next time. It gives them a bit of perspective. And I think, it still amazes me that we managed to pull these shows together, because the things that go wrong are pretty hectic. And you think, like, this is going to be it. This is going to be the day that it all falls apart. And every single time, we manage to bring the show on air, and from the viewers at home, they have no idea of the chaos that's going on in live television. It's absolutely incredible. And it's thousands of people coming together to make it all go round.
And I don't think people understand how difficult it is to just produce a broadcast for golf. Whereas if you're shooting basketball or football, English football, anything, like, you have fixed cameras, you sit in a booth, you say what you're looking at imagining trying to put cameras to capture 140 something people's golf shots on 18 holes across hundreds of acres of land with wires everywhere. It really is complicated, and it's further complicated for someone like you who has to think about how to say something in about 15 seconds after walking all around a golf course that's relevant. You may not even be seeing everything. I mean, maybe that's your next content piece, is like behind the scenes of golf production.
Yeah. I think people would be really surprised. And, we definitely have the easy part of the job, doing the stuff to camera, and certainly commentating. The technical side of it is really, really tricky, get the understanding how to listen to multiple voices, standing in the right place so you don't put the player off, understanding all this machinery you're carrying around your waist that weighs about 8 kilograms, and where, making sure your mic's not on, your mic is on when it needs to be on. So there is technical aspects to it, but the amount of work that, the technical team put in is absolutely enormous. And really, they become like a family, because they're out there traveling for like 25 weeks of the year. And I genuinely take my hat off to them, and I'm in awe of how it all comes together. It is absolutely remarkable. It really is.
A lot of consistency. We had a few episodes ago, had Dottie Pepper on, who, kind of an icon of broadcasting as well.
Absolutely.
And she said a lot of the same things. And the way she talked about some of not just the people she works with, but mentors in broadcasting, it really did feel like a tight-knit community, a family, if you will.
Oh, yeah. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Dottie a few times, because I do a couple of weeks a year rather for CBS. I work for CBS at the Masters, and Dottie is an icon, and particularly for female broadcasters. She's paved a way really for others, and to see the way that she's had a voice in the men's professional game for many, many years and earned so much respect it's really, really inspiring.
Well, put a pin in that, because I'm going to come back to that in a little bit to talk to you a little bit about, not about Dottie Pepper, but about broadcasting. But before I do that, if you Google your name, the title internet personality comes back.
Really?
You've never done it. So, okay. Yeah. Somebody's going to have to let you know what happens when they Google you, but it says internet personality. And how would you describe what you do? I don't know if that's sufficient. I mean, that's probably an element of it, but it's difficult to describe what you do. What would you put on the internet?
That is so strange. Internet personality. I would say that I'm a golfer and I'm a storyteller. I'm a professional golfer, although I don't compete on the tour anymore. And, my journey in professional golf was much shorter than I wanted it to be because of a career-ending wrist injury. But I kept my pro status, and I didn't touch a set of golf clubs or a club for like 3 years. But more recently, I've been able to play a bit more, and I still have my pro status because I felt there's a few things, a bit of unfinished business. And also I really enjoy teaching and coaching, although currently in my life, I don't have a lot of time to do it, but I hope I will in the future in another chapter. So I've hung on to my professional status, and I still really enjoy playing golf. And thankfully my wrist is playing ball a little bit more. Last year, I played a couple of professional events, and I went to open qualifying, and this year I haven't been able to try open qualifying again because my schedule's not allowed me, but I'm going to play a few Rose Lady Series events, which is a fantastic female tour in the UK founded by Justin Rose and his wife. So I still have fun on the golf course to have, and very, very grateful that I still have a relationship with the game when I thought that playing the game was over with my injury, which was very serious. And, I've had multiple operations on my wrists and things. So it's not really been a fun journey. But outside of that, I'm a broadcaster for Sky Sports Golf, and very lucky to be part of the team there. And I'm a presenter. In the UK, we'd call it presenter. I think in the States, maybe you'd say an anchor. I'm not sure, but the sort of envisioned person that welcomes the viewer along and says hello and welcome to day one of the Charles Schwab Challenge, for example. And actually, I did present the Charles Schwab from the London studio. So I wasn't on site, but I was presenting the tournament for Sky in the studio in London. And then sometimes I'm a commentator. So at the Open Championship, I was an on-course commentator. So I was inside the ropes commentating on, Rory McIlroy on the final day, for example. And I've had some unbelievable experiences doing that. And outside of live television, as I said, I'm a storyteller, and I've created a platform on YouTube called On the Road with Iona. And that's where I have a home for some of these stories. And that's really been a huge joy in my life in the last year and a half.
So not internet personality. So it's going to have a lot of slashes. It's this/this/this.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A lot of people in your position or who have similar spaces in the golf world, a lot of people learned at a very, very, very young age. That's not the case with you. Didn't you pick it up kind of later?
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
So when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of three. I've got two big brothers. And when we were growing up, my childhood, when I think about it, was just loads of sports, all the sports. But sadly, not golf. It wasn't, a game that my dad had kind of given up golf, the classic working too much, had kids, stopped playing golf. And actually, he played off 3 when he was like in his 20s. So he was a really good golfer. When he had a family, he stopped playing, which is really sad. And so we didn't play. We did play squash, and at school, I played all the sports that were available to me. So in the UK, we had field hockey, we had lacrosse, we had athletics, squash. And I took quite a few of them actually to international levels. So I competed at quite a high sort of junior level, and I really just loved sport. But it wasn't until I was 19 that I was introduced to the game of golf. And I took it up, and within a matter of moments decided that I wanted to play this game professionally. And to cut a very long story short, 4 years later, I turned professional off a handicap of +4 and got partial playing status on the Ladies European Tour. So, I just fell in love with the game. It was later than most, but I think that the multi-sport background gave me a lot of the hand-eye coordination, and I needed to really refine my skills. And when I turned pro, there was no denying I still had a lot of learning to do about the game, but I was under pressure because I was already kind of in my early 20s. And it was like this sort of, if you don't turn pro now, well, when will you turn pro? You can't turn pro when you're 30. I mean, nobody does that. So you better turn pro now kind of thing. There was playing opportunities. There was a fantastic tour in Spain called the Santander Tour. And I went over there and played quite a lot. And then I was just getting going, but I had this pain in my wrist, and I had this injury that was developing in my right wrist. And it was just devastating, to be honest, because, sport was my big love, and, I had enough talent to enjoy playing the game professionally. How far I could have gone with it, we'll never know now. But, I was ambitious and I wanted to give it a go, and I felt like it kind of got robbed from me, and that hurt really a lot at the time. But as ever in life, sometimes there's a bigger plan, and thankfully around the corner was an even bigger and equally as exciting opportunity, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And it's been an amazing life so far. So it's I'm having a good life, and I've got a lot to be grateful for.
So you've brought up the injury, and at this point you're still very young, but it's impossible to tell your story so far without that. That was a big moment for you. And if I remember correctly, you shared that very publicly. I think you were very vulnerable. It was very emotional. I think it got a lot of views on the internet. I mean, it was a very public experience. Thinking back on that now, why did you choose to be so open about it? And as you think about it now, has it gotten easier to talk about than it was then? Or is it okay? Yeah,
it's got a lot easier to talk about. I mean, I couldn't talk about it without getting really upset about it for a long time. And actually, I didn't share the journey until, that video I think you're referring to, I shared, must have been 2 years ago. So it took me quite a long time to share that video, and to say, by this point, I'd been working in the media for maybe 3.5 years. And, 99% of people had no idea that I actually had tried to play and had, played golf to a high level. And I remember very clearly sitting on the sofa. It was like in December, I was sitting on the sofa and I just started piecing little snippets of old little clips from the rehab that I had in my phone. And I just sort of pieced this thing together, and I was like, do you know, maybe I'll share this to the world, like my audience that I'd grown, that so they, you know, they know where I've been and what's led me to this point. Because actually, it was really a story of, or a piece of gratitude, and how grateful I felt, because I had just recently presented the Ryder Cup. So I presented the Ryder Cups in 2023. So it must have been in December of 23 that I posted that video. And I just couldn't believe it, really. I was sitting there thinking about the year I had had, and like how my life had just changed so much in such a short space of time. And I was looking back at these videos of me having my second surgery, my third surgery. You know, I remember having, you know, wounds in my legs because I was getting these stem cells taken out of my legs and then injected into my wrist. And I remember just being in such a deep, deep hole with trying desperately, like absolute desperation, to fix this injury, because playing professional golf, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I was like, just in this absolute state of desperation. And little did I know that I was going to have to eventually surrender and give up, you know, the chase for fixing it, and surrender to the fact that sometimes the body has other plans and that life has other plans. And little did I know there was this unbelievable opportunity and adventure just waiting for me around the corner. And if I hadn't had that injury, I would never have known that, because I would have just kept tunneling down the professional golf road. And who knows where that would have led me? We'll never know. But what I do know is the adventure I've been on since 2020 really has been absolutely remarkable and truly a gift. And I'm so lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones, Mason, and it's been amazing. And I'm very, very grateful. And I think that video that I posted in 2023, which did go quite viral, it had millions and millions of views, which I really didn't expect. It's funny, the internet. And as an internet personality, you'd think I would know more, but I didn't expect that response. And I think it was just really a piece of gratitude and thanks, and hopefully sharing a bit of hope for people who put their eggs in one basket and think, this is my thing, and if this doesn't work out, then life's over. Just a reminder that there's actually maybe just another basket waiting to be picked up just after and around the corner. And that's certainly the story I've had so far.
Well, it's a great life lesson, no matter what you do. If when you kind of narrowly define yourself, you know, what you at least have to be open to what would happen if that changes, whatever it is, if that's work or certain things in your friends, or it could be lots of things. When you made the decision to stay in and around the game of golf, you know, did you think about getting a desk job? They're lovely, I must say. Were you committed when you, I guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, when you started to feel like you had to surrender to at least the professional playing dream, were you then saying, well, I'm going to stick around this one way or another, I'm not leaving the world of golf? How did you go through that?
Well, I've always been a maverick in life, I will say that, and tend to find my own path, much to my family's horror. But I was absolutely determined that I would not be anywhere near golf. It had broken my heart, and I could not bear to be around. I couldn't even bear to see a golf club. So I got rid of all my golf stuff and I packed up shop and said, no, like no more golf. Because it was like a bad breakup. Like imagine a big love and a bad breakup, and then being forced to see your ex every day. Like that's bad news. So you need to find a new environment and a new space. So I got really into triathlon actually, and duathlon. I picked up cycling, and I trained as a personal trainer. I got a diploma in sports nutrition, and I decided that I wanted to go into like optimal health, like health optimization. And I was so determined to still try and fix my wrist. So there was definitely like an ulterior motive there, but it wasn't in the context of golf anymore. Like I was struggling to brush my own teeth. I couldn't brush my own hair. Like my wrist was so painful that it was affecting my day-to-day life. So I was determined in my early 20s that my wrist could not be like this forever. Like absolutely not. And I've refused to take no for an answer, but I accept my fate with golf. So I accepted that golf wasn't going to be a career for me anymore. And I'm kind of an all or nothing person. So if I wasn't going to get the chance to try and become like the best and become an LPGA player, I didn't want to be a part of it. So yeah, I got really into training. I became very physically very fit, like the fittest I've ever been in my life. And I started coaching some spinning classes and just really trying to figure out my next move. And I really was getting into kind of health optimization and trying to, I suppose, something that's always been a big part of my life is just trying to like live a really good life. Like, how can we make the most of the time that we have here? And a lot of that comes, in my belief, from good health, and if you have good health, then you have good opportunities and the world is at your feet. But if you don't have your health, then life can become very hard. And I'd had a tiny taste of that with my wrist, and it had been quite debilitating. And I'd had to learn a lot of things left-handed, and I was trying to find a way around it. So I was actually in the process of setting up an optimal retreat camp in Switzerland with a friend of mine who was a CrossFit trainer in where I was living at the time. We were setting up these retreats to the Swiss Alps where you could go and basically optimize yourself. And I was really going down this kind of route. And I got a phone call from a producer at IMG inviting me to be the presenter for a golfing TV show called Golfing World. And Anna Whiteley, who was the presenter, was moving to America.
Wait, is this like your ex? Is this like the ex showing up after a while?
Yeah.
And then
I saw the ex calling, and I was like, hell no, like this bridge is burnt, baby. Like you take it somewhere else.
I left you a long time ago.
Yeah, like no. There was definitely some like Usher song I was wanting to play. Like, you're not getting this back. So actually, when they invited me to go, I actually said no. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I'm not interested in being around golf. Like, I think of nothing worse. And they were like, well, listen, would you just come for a screen test? Come for a screen test and then let's say no. So I agreed to go for a screen test, still in a bit of a huff, like kind of feeling a bit huffy about it all. I did a screen test and I thought, well, that isn't going to lead anywhere. Like, it's someone else will be biting the arm off for this job. And within a few days, I got a call from the producer, Rob Phillips Knight, who I saw last week actually at the Open. And he said, we'd like to invite you to Mexico to the World Match Play to come and interview Phil Mickelson and Molinari, who had just won the Open. And we'd like you to be the presenter. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's definitely not going to happen. And thanks, but no thanks. So this guy, Rob, he's so nice. And he was such a lovely guy. And he was like, look, how about you just come for the week? Just see it as a free holiday to Mexico. And if you like it, great. If you don't, no hard feelings. So I agreed to do that. And I'm very pleased to say that I got over myself and my hard feelings. And I had the most amazing trip in Mexico. And the end of the week, after I'd interviewed Phil Mickelson, I'd interviewed Molinari and Dustin Johnson, all these guys that were right at the peak of their powers at that time. I kept home and I was sitting, with a coffee in my hand. And I thought that, that was pretty great. Like, that was quite good. And they've paid me to do that. That was pretty win-win. So they offered me, they said, look, can we offer you like a partial contract and, whatever you feel is right. Like, we don't want to put too much pressure on you. They were so great about it. And thankfully I got over, my feelings, and I recognized the opportunity, and I agreed to become the presenter for this show called Golfing World. And it was a TV magazine show. We traveled all over the world. That was in 2019, second half of 2019. And it really was the best year of my life. And it just completely transformed any ideas I had about not being able to be involved in golf anymore and not being able to be near golf. It was like exposure therapy, if you will. And, I managed to slowly reimagine my relationship with golf. And it absolutely is different from the 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, that was full of ambition to be, the next Lorena Ochoa or, the next Katrina Matthew. I wanted to be a golf player. I wanted to play the game. And this new relationship was born in 2019, and it's become something beautiful and brilliant. And, now I'm more in love with the game of golf than I ever have been. And it's truly been an amazing journey. But a lot of it is about that willingness to surrender and recognizing that we might think we're in control of everything, but actually sometimes there's more going on, and it's okay just to surrender and see where life takes you, because sometimes it can take you somewhere really, really beautiful. And it has for me in many ways.
Did producers or the BBC or anybody, did they see something in you or things in you that you didn't know you had or that you weren't aware of, skills or other things?
I think you'd have to ask them, Mason, because I don't know. But, I think they liked that I had a really rich knowledge of the game. I think that really helped. And, they probably could recognize that my love of the game and therefore my knowledge of it was very authentic and very deep. So what was great about that is that all that love, I was a real deep student of the game. Like, I was completely obsessed with golf when I was learning it, because I started late. I was trying to prove that you didn't need this 10,000 hours, and that you could actually, instead of learning through trial and error, you could study and learn and understand, and I could make you laugh with the notebooks I have. I have thousands of notebooks when I was learning the game of golf. And for example, I went to a B&Q, which I guess would be like your Home Depot. And I got all this clay, and I used to do things like I made a clay mold of my grip. So I had my grip and I molded it, and I'd have 6 of them, one in my car, one in my living room, one in my kitchen. So whenever I was sitting in traffic, I'd be practicing my grip, and I'd be absolutely nailing the fundamentals, because I knew that I was short on time, or I thought I was short on time. In hindsight, I wasn't really, we've always got more time than we think, but I was just such a deep, deep student of the game. And I loved understanding the swing, and, trying to understand it annoyed me in the beginning when coaches would say things to me and I wouldn't understand, because so much of golf is so technical, and these coaches can use a lot of jargon and words that are just gobbledygook. And I'd be going, I don't know what swinging from the inside or an attack angle of +4, what does that even mean? I just didn't really understand, and it drove me nuts. So I needed to learn. And so I suppose, and I loved the professional game too, and I watched a lot of golf. So I think in the beginning, they probably enjoyed that knowledge that I had, and could see that would be really useful in the context of interviewing players and doing pieces to camera.
There's either going to be people extremely inspired by you or really mad at you that you got to a +4 in that quick of a time, which is an area that 99.7% of golfers never get to anyway, much less in 3 or 4 years. Hopefully it's inspiring. But I was going to ask you this earlier, but you're hitting on some of these themes now, which is, where did you get this drive and determination? Because again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It feels like you're either highly competitive or you're trying to prove something or someone wrong, or it's because you don't make clay molds from the Home Depot or H&Q or whatever it is, and you don't leave golf and then go talk about the health optimization in Switzerland. Where did this come from that you're just so on your front foot?
I don't know if I've ever had to really think about that, but I've certainly asked other people that. I think my childhood, so much of our character and our traits are developed in our childhood, and I was the youngest of 3. So even to get involved in the game with my brother is I had to be good, and I remember very clearly my brothers were great athletes in themselves, brilliant cricket players and rugby players and very natural sportsmen. And they used to kick a football outside our house against the garage, and my eldest brother, Jamie, would say that I couldn't play. And my middle brother would say, yeah, she can play, let her play. And Jamie would say, oh, she's not good enough. This isn't for little people. This is a serious game. And then my middle brother would say, he, bless classic middle child, he was always keeping the peace. And he was like, well, how about we give her a shot? Let her take some penalties. And they would test me out and be like, are you good enough to take part? And, I'd have to rise to the occasion if I wanted to be part of the game. Otherwise, I was stuck inside, making jam with my mum or, doing something like that. And I wanted to play the game. So I think having 2 elder brothers was a real gift. And, the fact they were really sporty helped me. But I think I remember very young, being the only girl in a family as well. It's an interesting dynamic, because what my brothers were thick as thieves, they were best friends, and they were inseparable. And I was always on the outside trying to break in, can I join in? And my family used to say on my death stone that it would always say "me too," because I'd always want to be like, "Oh, me too." Like, can I play as well?
Yeah.
And I think that shapes the way that you approach things in life. And I suppose there was, from a young age, like this needing to prove myself. But I do distinctly remember from a very young age, like probably from about 11, I'm going to say, I remember thinking just one day, like, I'm going to be excellent at something. And my love was sport. And, I remember watching the Olympics, and I remember seeing Kelly Holmes winning the double gold at the Olympics. And there are other things I can remember that really inspired me when I was a kid. And I think that's why visibility and young kids watching sport is so powerful. Like here in the UK yesterday, you probably saw that England won the Euros in soccer, in football, and this is the women's team. And, the number of young girls that will have inspired is just out of this world, incredible, the impact these things can have. And I do remember, for whatever reason, when I was little, my brother says he remembers the day that it changed. He said he remembers the day that is like he watched his little sister like become just some sort of focus on another level. And I remember the time I was like 12, I used to go out running before school, and my dad, my mum, like they were not doing these things. Like my dad was an architect and, kind of worked a lot. He wasn't waking me up in the morning and saying, come on then, let's go and do this. I remember begging my dad to take me out after school to hit extra hockey shots with me in the top of Calton Hill, which is this hill in Scotland. And he remembers those fondly, and he did it, he'd do it. But it was really, there was an internal drive that I'd be asking him, please dad, come and do this with me. Please dad, can we go to the swimming pool and have a race? And I just had this absolute desire to try and see how far I could go with something. And that was always just, I guess, part of my DNA. And probably I could put it down to the dynamic of being the youngest and the only girl in this sort of sibling lineup, really. That's about the only thing I can put it down to.
If it's not that, I don't know what it would be. That has all the makings of drive and wanting to prove that you can succeed. Has Jamie is your oldest brother?
Yeah, Jamie.
Does he ever ring you and say, hey, you're doing okay? Or is he still busting your chops and saying you could do better?
No, well, listen, I became the first female commentator in an EA sports game, and that was the day I earned Jamie's respect. So the day I did that, he was like, okay,
finally,
you did it. You've done it.
You're like, it wasn't presenting the Ryder Cup in Rome. It wasn't interviewing Justin Rose. It's getting to be a voice in the EA video game.
100%. Okay. And the day my dad got really proud of me was when I got a deal with a lawnmower company. That was the day he was like, that's my little girl.
Yeah, she made it. She finally has made it. She got the lawnmower deal. I want to talk a little bit about the difference, if there is one, or the murky area between like factual journalism and your opinions. And I guess through the lens of when you're on course reporting is one area I'd like to hear where you're supposed to be our eyes when we're watching, or you're telling us things we can't see. But do you ever think about where your opinion fits into that? And then I guess in your case, you have other channels where you can share your opinion. So how do you think about the difference between you as reporting facts and where that happens, and you as someone who may have thoughtful personal opinions about golf?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a path you have to tread very carefully. When I'm wearing my Sky Sports golf hat or CBS hat, there's a real differentiation between, are you the question asker or are you the question answerer? And actually, in the world of broadcasting, I'm 90% of the time the question asker. So there is very few occasions where I'm actually really offering up a very strong opinion. I think the viewer expects me to have a knowledge and a credibility. And I think the UK viewers, certainly by this point, 5 years in, they know, like, I'm completely absorbed in this game. And I'd like to think I'm a hard worker. I do the work, and they can count on me for bringing a good report to them from the ground that's been well researched and presented in a way that's unbiased, I suppose, and factual based. we have guests, I think, I'm trying to think what you call them in America, but you maybe call them an analyst. I mean, if you're an analyst or a guest, that's more when you're in a position where you're being asked your opinion. And I do actually play that role a couple of times a year, but it's very rare that I would wear that hat. And that's been a conscious decision. And at the beginning of my broadcasting career, I remember very clearly sitting down with my boss, Jason, and saying, he explained this to me in black and white. And he said, you've got a chance to have a really great career in broadcasting. But the way broadcasting works, you're in a unique position because normally we have presenters that come quite often from like journalism school. And, they may be able to present American football. They could present the soccer. They could present Formula One, and they come into golf. Or we have, a guy that's played 15 years, won twice on the PGA, and he's coming in and sitting as an analyst or as a guest, But you're kind of a hybrid of the two. And you've got a foot in both camps, but you need to make a decision about which you're going to nurture. Are you going to be the question asker from an informed place? Or are you going to be the question answerer? And you're going to have to need a damn good reason why people should trust what you've got to say. So I looked at my career and, my life and my journey that I'd had and also my skill set. And I decided, and with Jason's as a mentor and as my boss and advisor, that I would nurture being a question asker. So that's where I've developed into the role of the presenter, where I would have two guests alongside me in the studio. And normally I'm drawing out their opinions and their thoughts. Occasionally, because of the way the team is, like, you have to be able to wear every hat in a broadcasting team occasionally, because you just don't know. Like, somebody might get ill and they might say, look, can you do this? You have to be able to adapt and be okay with that. But generally speaking, I'm the question asker. In a commentary role, you're literally just stating facts. You're saying what you see. And again, the voice I've developed as an on-course commentator, rarely, when I'm commentating on men's golf, rarely will you, if ever, would you ever say, I would never say, like, I wouldn't play it like that. I would actually never use the word I. It's something that I'm not to do. It's not something you'll hear very often, certainly in British broadcasting. It's always we, or, it's the plural term, because I am the eyes and the ears and the voice of the viewer, really. And I'm trying to say, like, we're a bit surprised about that. Very rarely would I make it about me, but I'm saying what I see and I'm trying to describe things. I'm trying to find interesting ways to tell the viewer in a visual way what is going on. And that's really exciting. It's a really, really fun thing to try and do. And like the final round of the Open Championship, Rory and Matt Fitzpatrick, was that the day I was commentating on Matt Fitzpatrick? I'm sure it was with Rory. And Matt pulled his shot at the third hole. It was the par 3 and it landed in a little divot. And, I could have just said, like, the ball's in a divot, there it is. But you're constantly like, this is a bad lie. Like, hard luck, Matt. Now he's got no chance of getting this up and down. He's short-sighted. He's got no green to work with. But your brain is going constantly into a creative space of like, how can I describe this better in a way that other people haven't? And you can't do that for all the time. But in that instance, I guess being around Ireland and all the tales of Ireland, I managed to come up with, he's found a golfing relic of a round gone by. And it's like just an interesting way, or like different way of saying the same thing, and that's the challenge of commentary. It's not really about my opinion, but it certainly requires effort to be creative. And I love being creative with this games, and certainly with my vocabulary. It's really stretched my vocabulary in a brilliant way. And you learn about the words you lean on and they get highlighted. Are you aware that you use the word wonderful 1,000 times a day, or whatever your lean on word
right.
is,
And you say like to bridge things.
Yeah. Or you say, in between everything. So you pick up on these things, and feedback's important in that sense. But, the challenge of on-course commentary is definitely a creative challenge. And then On the Road with Iona as a separate platform is somewhere where I would maybe develop more of a voice and more of an opinion about certain things. But On the Road with Iona isn't an opinionated channel. It's a space that's been designed to hopefully inspire and uplift people through golf. And that is the essence of that channel. So the voice I try to have in that space is very authentic. It's definitely my voice, but it's away from any political agenda or any like controversy. We don't jump on clickbaity things. That's not the style that we have. We try to have it as a place for good. and, to hopefully spread a bit of love and more joy in the world. And we use golf as the vehicle to do that. So hopefully that's answered that question.
Yeah, but do you think that 300 years from now, when they talk about all these different characters in golf through the years, that your small contribution might be about authenticity and positivity within the game, maybe when it was needed in the world or something like that? I mean, do you think about that as something you're depositing and leaving behind here on this earth or in the space of golf? Or
Yeah, I think so. I think what inspired me as well to create On the Road with Iona was the idea that we wanted to create some time capsule pieces. So we wanted to speak to people who have done remarkable things in the game of golf and outside the game of golf, and time capsule them in a way that in 100 years from now, or maybe 500 years from now, people think, thank goodness that interview exists. And, I feel like we've had a couple of really special interviews. Butch Harmon's interview was a particularly special one. We did one recently with Sam Torrance, one of the greatest Ryder Cup legends from the Team Europe side of things. But that was an inspiration, was to capture people's stories, to give them a place to have a home. So it wasn't really about me in the channel, but by default, by creating these stories and giving people's stories and lessons from life a home in a really beautiful space. We try to create the pieces that are quite well curated and good production values, and in the hope that in 100 years from now, these stories will outlive us all. And, there's so many greats from the past that we don't have. Like, imagine if we had like a really good interview with Ben Hogan, or, great characters from the past, and we don't have them, but we have the means to have them now. And, I wanted On the Road with Iona to be a home for a lot of these time capsule pieces. And I also like to, occasionally we get guests, I love to capture their thoughts at that moment in time. So it's not just people at the later stage of their journey, but also the interview we did with Adam Scott, for example, is a lot about his longing to win the Claret Jug and to win the Open. And I thought about the value of that if he actually goes on to win the Open, and how valuable that would be as a piece of content.
Well, he was in the mix of the US Open, and he's an inspiration for people that aren't 22 years old and swinging it 130 miles an hour. So.
Yeah, totally. He is an inspiring guy.
A couple of final questions for you. You mentioned this earlier, and at the risk of getting extremely deep or existential, do you think that the injury was part of some other bigger plan, or do you think that life just kind of unfolds and that just sent you down a different road?
I'm not sure I really have the answer for that yet, because what I do think to be true is that we should never just be one thing in life. And I believe that it's okay to reinvent yourself time and time again in life. And I learned a lot, and I was inspired to think this way through the Michelle Obama's book, actually, Becoming. And in the book, the very opening chapter is worth a read if you don't make it through the whole thing, because it's quite a big read. But she talks about the fear that we have sometimes in life to reinvent ourselves, because as a kid, you're always asked what you want to be when you grow up. And, there's this pressure to become one thing. And it's like, if you don't become it, then you failed. That could be a fear that kids have, and certainly a fear that I had. I dropped out of university. I changed university. I said no to a scholarship at Syracuse University to play field hockey, to put all my eggs in one basket to become a professional golfer. And it failed. And I failed. But that doesn't necessarily make me a failure. That particular quest didn't work out. But that is okay in life. And I think that sometimes we don't celebrate that enough. We don't say, listen, like you really, really tried. And that is ultimately what matters in life. Because if you're not failing, then you're arguably not trying enough things, So I think it's okay to become many things. And, Mason, I hope that we have another chance to chat in 5 years, and we can chat about what we both become in the next 5 years, because who knows what is next, And I think that it's a great gift in life to have the courage to know that you can become something totally new if you want to, and to give it a go, even if it doesn't work out. And certainly that's what my life and my little journey has taught me so far. And I think to strap yourself into something, go for it, 100%. And if it doesn't work out, then you should still feel really proud of yourself that you gave it a go.
It's incredible how many lessons we extract out of golf. I know we can get these lessons from lots of places, but it never stops giving us all these amazing, useful parallels and metaphors for life. Thanks for sharing that. Final question I want to ask you, which I ask everybody. When you think about the future of golf in any way that you want to think about it, what makes you optimistic about golf looking forward?
I think what makes me optimistic about golf looking forward is the connection that it brings with people. You know, me and you here today. And I think that the world, you know, the digital world that's in this digital sort of revolution that we've experienced in our lifetime, but now more than ever with phones everywhere and smartphones in kids' hands. And, you know, AI is a whole other chapter that's evolving in front of our very eyes. You know, the digital world is so powerful and really overtaking a lot of the time that we have for connection. And golf, for me right now, is the greatest thing in the world for connecting with people and connecting together with family and friends and getting out somewhere where you can put your phone away. And I personally think that's very exciting. And if it's professional golf, the way that it's continuing to grow in both the men's and the women's game, that continues to be a big, big light and an inspiration for people taking up the game, you know, that's so important. And I know that golf's growing as a sport, and that makes me feel real hope. And I see friends of mine that had no interest in golf taking it up and getting into it, whether that's just as a range golfer or, you know, casually doing it at small, short 9-hole courses, whatever. I think that to be part of the game of golf is truly one of the most brilliant gifts in life. And I really, really mean that. And I think it gives me great hope for, you know, people that live for the next 50 to 100 years, for the next generation, for my kids that are yet to come, for their kids, for the next generations, because we still need to put our phones down and connect with one another. And I think that golf's a great excuse to do that.
I couldn't have said it better, and you have matched everything that I've ever believed about the game, but much more articulate coming from you. Based on what you said earlier about all of your travel, I very much appreciate the time, particularly during an open week. And good luck. The list of things to say good luck for, I don't even know, for broadcasting, for on the road, for your professional game, which we hope to maybe see a little bit here and there, and for your future career, which sounds like might be more engaging golf lessons or teaching, where without quite all the technical jargon. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mason. It's been a joy.
So that's it for us today. Thanks for listening. If you want to give Iona a follow on Instagram, her handle is @IonaStephen. It's all one word, IONASTEPHEN. And be sure to check out her website, ionastephen.com, and her YouTube channel, On the Road with Iona. I'll have links in the show notes. For all of Schwab's golf content, including our films, tournament news, and promotions, check out schwabgolf.com. If you've enjoyed the show, which we hope you did, we'd be really grateful if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, rating on Spotify, or feedback wherever you listen. We'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. For important disclosures, see the show notes or schwab.com/thegame.